Hey everyone, it's Thursday, June 1st, 2023. I'm making this video because I realized there is a very interesting way of going deeper and demonstrating even more clearly why or how the lack of a clear definition or a positive definition of a person in Trinitarian theology results in the hypostatic properties actually just being at best energies, or essentially just energies, but not in any way directly correlating with a person per se. So by way of review, just very, very briefly, so this video is going to be about the third and final point I made in the video the other day about why the person's reduced to the essence and the hypostatic properties reduced to energies. This is specifically going to be talking about, I'm just specifically focusing here on that last part, that last point about the relation between the hypostatic properties and the energies. So starting from the top, we have pointed out that in reality, the hypostatic property assigned to the Father within Eastern Trinitarian thought is just an intrinsic aspect or characteristic of the divine essence, which is uncausedness or unoriginateness. What that implies is that the Father actually participates in the divine essence to a greater extent or greater degree than the Son and Spirit, since their hypostatic properties are just modes of origination. There isn't a property unique to the Father that is distinct from the essence, since the Father's property of unoriginateness is intrinsic to the divine nature. Okay, so with that reiterated, and keeping that in the back of your minds, we said in the last video that there is something other than the divine nature per se that the three persons must have if all three should be considered persons. That means if all three are persons, then there must be something that we termed personhood that the three must share in. Again, if they are all, in fact, persons. Now, how might we attempt to show that there is nothing like that in Trinitarian theology? By process of elimination, we're going to show that all of the potential options at their disposal reduces to a response that would not be adequate to demonstrating that they are in fact persons. So if they all participate in something that constitutes what we're terming personhood, what we pointed out was that that poses a serious problem, because the church teaches that whatever the three persons have in common pertains to the divine nature. And that is how we reasoned that, looking at it or examining it from that particular angle, the persons would in fact reduce to the divine nature or essence. Now, here's the other thing they could try to do. I may be jumping ahead of myself. Hold on. Where was I going to go from here? Okay, let's take a quick step back to what we said about the Father. So if one is to advance the idea that what they have in common, if one were to define a person as one who has a mode of origin, that wouldn't work, because they don't all three have a mode of origin. The Father doesn't have a mode of origin. The Son's mode of origin is to be begotten or generated by the Father, and the Spirit's mode of origin is to be spirated by the Father, to proceed from the Father. Excuse me. So, unoriginateness, which is the hypostatic property of the Father, is not a mode of origin. What else might you call it, then? An attribute of the Father? I guess it would be an attribute of the Father to be unoriginate, but that would just make him, as we said, reducible to the divine nature. So let's just call that an attribute. Are all three persons, do they share in... is the thing that they have in common that they have attributes? Well, no, that can't be. Number one, because only the Father has an attribute as his hypostatic property. The other two have a mode of origin as their hypostatic property. The other problem with that is that attributes in Orthodoxy, in the Eastern tradition, are just energies, right? Like will, which are things that the three persons are said to have in common. So it's not just the essence that they have in common. All three of the persons are said to possess each and every one of the divine energies equally. But persons are not energies. The Orthodox tradition is very clear that a person is something other than an energy. So if it's not an energy, if a person is not an energy, and a person is not an attribute, which is essentially an energy, and a person is not known by mode of origin, since they don't all three have a mode of origin, the Father doesn't have one, we're still left scratching our heads as to what is that common denominator which communicates, which is possessed by all three persons and communicates the idea that each of the three is does in fact partake of personhood. If you say, well, there isn't some common thing called personhood that they partake of, since, let's say they want to be consistent. They realize that if they say that, if they affirm that there's something common, such as personhood that the three persons have, that would reduce to the nature, they could turn around and opt to, define each person by their hypostatic property. Now, we just showed that the hypostatic properties are not the same, because they can be classified in two different ways. The Father has a hypostatic property that is just an attribute of the divine essence, whereas the other two persons have hypostatic properties that correspond to their mode of causation. So, obviously there's nothing. What is it that distinguishes a hypostatic property from, say, an energy? And if you do say that a person is essentially the hypostatic property that denotes the uniqueness of that person and separates it or distinguishes that person from the other two, as well as from the divine essence, then what you're doing then, that would be more in character with the energies, because the Orthodox teaching is that the energies are infinite in number. So no energy is the same as any other energy. So if the energy of the Father is something other than the energy of the Son, which is something other than the energy of the Holy Spirit, and they're all mutually exclusive, then essentially you're saying that the hypostases are energies. What is it that distinguishes a person from an energy? You know, what is it at the very foundation of a person that distinguishes it from an energy? Is it is it that it is in relation to something or someone else, in the sense that it interacts on a personal level? And if so, what is the difference, though? What is, you know, if energies and persons are of the essence, if they instantiate the essence in some sense, and they are each unique. Now, again, they say that a person, or excuse me, they say that all three persons have each of the individual energies equally. So an energy like will would be possessed equally by all three of the persons, in the same way that the essence is possessed equally by each of the three persons. But we still don't know what a person is. We know that it's not it's not attributes, because those are energies. We know that it's not mode of origination, because that only applies to two persons, not to a third. So what distinguishes a hypostatic property from an energy such that a hypostatic property constitutes a person? We're never really given an answer to this question, which is why you ultimately, in the end, have to conclude that a hypostatic property is just an energy with a personal name. You know, because what was I going to say? Yeah, because so for example, if I mean, just on the face of it, to say that a person is identical to that person's mode of origin, that makes no sense. I mean, okay, yeah, I was born of a human mother, right? That's the mode of origin of all human beings. So does being born of a human mother, from the womb of a human mother, have anything to do with my unique identity as Jonathan? Well, obviously not. The way I came into being doesn't identify the I that came into being. What I am or who I am is not the same as how I came into being. Those are two different things. So basically I'm just trying to show that a person is totally elusive in Eastern Christian thought and even in Western Christian thought. I don't think I'm overlooking anything. I've thought this through to the nth degree. We've eliminated attributes, we've eliminated energies, we've eliminated hypostatic properties, because one hypostatic property doesn't have anything to do with mode of origin, whereas the other two do. None of those things are common to, mode of origin. Neither mode of origin nor attribute is common to all three persons, which means that the hypostatic properties cannot be equal to the person. So again, this comes back to a point I made earlier, that if each of the persons is simply known by how, by the fact that it is not the other two persons, then there's no way in which to define a person differently from an insentient non-person, or just an object, which is why consciousness is so essential to personhood. So this comes back to the Dharmic understanding that consciousness is essential to personhood, and that, like we said in one of my in my video about how nature, person, and energy correspond in the system of Sanatana, in the philosophy of Sanatana Dharma, the person is simply the core subjectivity of this infinite, unlimited, unbounded field of consciousness. I think that is it for now.